morning, everyone. This is update for July 2022, day 147 of the war, end of the date update. As always, we're going to discuss strategic and general issues, problems, and then we're going to switch to the walk through the front line. And as always, we do with mostly focus on economy, we focus on energy, we focus on food, and rarely we focus unless we forced on politics. So today there's no politics. Let's actually focus on economy first, on macroeconomy specifically. So we discussed yesterday a super corrupt organization called Naftogaz. That's basically monopoly in distributing natural gas in Ukraine. So today they actually asked for 5 billion from Ukrainian government, essentially because the foreign markets to borrow from they are frozen, they're closed for Naftogaz, so they have to go to government to ask for money, and they're asking 5 billion US dollars as equity infusion. And what they're asking for, they're asking that they need to buy natural gas on the European market. They need to buy 5 billion cubic meters for the winter, which means that the assumption that they're going to be able to pay $1,000 for per thousand cubic meters of natural gas, which is, we mentioned before, unrealistic price. Right now, it's between 16 and 1700 in Europe on the spot market, because that's where they're going to be buying it, and that really means that there is nothing available for $1,000, and very unlikely, given the whole situation, that the price will go down since we're going into the winter when the prices are going up in general. So that's one update. Then there is another update on their request by Ukrainian government to basically provide a grace period on paying foreign debt and interest on that debt. So the request was granted by their sovereign creditors. What this means is that Ukraine borrows from different kind of creditors or lenders on international markets. Some of them are countries like sovereigns, like US, France, Germany, UK, those, and then it borrows also from private lenders. So what Ukrainian government achieved, they achieved reprieve from their governmental lenders on international market, and it's called Paris Club, right? So that's the sovereigns that giving sort of reprieve to Ukrainian government, Ukrainian economy. The part that's not still under negotiations is with the private lenders. That's what we sort of discussing yesterday. And we actually now know a little bit more about the names, who they represented by. It's BlackRock, as we guessed. Then there is Fidelity, which is a large manager in the US, asset manager in US. And then two more lesser known names. We actually don't even know them. AMAI Capital and Gemstock Capital. That's probably some kind of hedge funds, small hedge funds. That's more sort of like use that opportunity for trading. with those lenders, there's still negotiation, but their sovereign lenders, they encouraged private lenders to reach agreement with Ukrainian government as well. And those the private lenders are usually called London Club. So that's sort of the update on this situation. In general, it's positive for Ukrainian economy because it's totally not able to pay the debt load that was created, because Ukraine is not even controlling significant portion of its territories, and also lost significant portion of its industry, which generates obviously value add to pay the loans. So in many ways, that's a positive result. In addition, going back to what the situation in Ukrainian economy and how it feels from within. So there was information that rents in Kyiv, which is here, capital of Ukraine, went down since the beginning of the war by 52%. Not to mention that also they went down because Ukrainian currency depreciated by at least 30%. So the whole sort of, if you sort of from a perspective of the let's say euro or US dollar, they went down much more. So this is just in nominal sort of terms in Ukrainian hryvnia. Then there was information about the actually agricultural situation in Ukraine, and specifically about winter crops, and just generally, just for those who are not totally not familiar with agriculture, there are winter crops, and basically you plant the seeds in the fall, and they sort of how to say then they just kind of stay through the winter, and then they grow in the spring, and then summer you harvest them at the end of the summer in August, and actually some of them in July. But then also spring crops, right? You plant them in spring, and they just sort of much sort of shorter period of time that they grow. And winter crops tend to be better because there is more time for vegetation to sort of for the seeds to adjust to the soil and become stronger and so on. So yields on this, on the winter, we have information for the winter part. So yields on those are expected to be down 15%. And then the territory that's sort of where they planted also went down from 9.1 million hectares to 8.4 million hectares. So that's a little bit less than 10, more than 5%, less than 10%, somewhere like 7-8% ballpark. So as a result, the crop just from this winter was from the winter plants is going to be down probably sometime like more than 20%, 22-23% down. So it's essentially close to quarter down. So that's already sort of the first news about that. And our interpretation, obviously, on that situation is that the yields are really driven by the farmers to the great extent, by how much fertilizer they spend on them and so on. So it really means that this is our assumption that everybody who's farming, they trying to reduce their risk, right, by not investing, minimizing their investment, right, because they don't know what's going to happen. So what they do, they put less fertilizer, so as a result you have fewer, like smaller yield. And that's really what's happening, and that's actually not the worst situation right now. As we discussed many times, some time ago, the actual problem will be next year in 2023, if this war, let's say, persists as many expect till at least New Year. That's where the real hit is going to come actually next summer, not this summer and not this fall. It will be tight, but it's not going to be sort of like dangerously tight. Then let's actually switch a little bit to Russia and what's going on with oil and gas production in Russia. So there were news that Russia is producing still producing about 10.8 million barrels per day. This is exactly pretty much the same what Russia was producing in, let's say, February, March of this year. And we also many had expectation that the production is going to go down because of the sanctions, right? Because Russia does not have, let's say, oil field services technology to extract in sort of more difficult, challenging environments. Where it's easy, then it's easy. There is no problem. It's no brainer. But there are a lot of wells where it's maybe not super difficult, but it's not super easy at the same time. It's kind of like in the middle. And so what is happening actually, what we found out that not like, I guess, all of the Western oil field services companies, which are essentially providing technology and essentially kind of like operators that help to extract that oil, they all staying in Russia. They all working full force. So that's explanation why the Russian oil production is not going down, because everything kind of essentially stays the same as it used to be at the beginning of the war. Then, in terms of selling Russian oil, there are interesting developments. We still not 100% certain if they are true or not, but there are some rumors, and specifically Bloomberg reported that purchases of Russian crude dropped by 30% by India and China. And that's obviously, as you remember, we discussed that essentially Russia redirected a majority of its oil exports that not bought anymore by Europe or US to India and China, where it's actually in China specifically, Russia is number one supplier of crude oil, and India, I think it's number two or also number one, ahead of basically Saudi Arabia. And so in India was buying about 1 million barrels per day, and I think China was buying also 2 million barrels per day, or maybe even three. But the point is, it's not exactly the numbers. Is that both countries are reducing the purchases, and the reason why this might be happening is the pressure from the West, where there is a new idea how to sort of make sanctions painful for Russia. And the idea is the following: is put a ceiling on how much Russia can get for its oil, and the ceiling is about $30 to $40 per barrel. So as you can imagine, now it's 100. Even Russia receiving is somewhere, let's say 75, 78. So the new proposed ceiling specifically for Russian crude is about $30 to $40, right? So it cuts off about half of your revenue. And that's really, removing significant source of finances for the war. So that's the idea. And obviously, the only way to do it is to by putting pressure on India and China, so that they stop buying reducing purchases of Russian oil, and forcing basically Russia to sell it for $30 to $40 on the world market. So it remains to be seen if this scenario works, but certainly probably India and China are happy to sort of cooperate in this scenario, because it's in their interest to receive, instead of paying $75 for crude, they're going to pay, let's say 30 or 35 or 40, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just much cheaper, right? And both countries, especially India, is pretty poor. So for them, it's a big reprieve, given the whole general inflation, in general everywhere that we're seeing, right? Because it hurts India the same way as it hurts, I don't know, UK. It's the same. It's one big global world, right? So everything is connected this day, for better or for worse. We're not saying that this is, totally great. In some ways it's great, in many ways it's bad. So it's not black and white. But so this is reality we're living in. And so the response from the Russian government, from Russian president, was, if this scheme is forced on us, we're just gonna stop export completely, and that may make possible scenario of JP Morgan, where they predicting oil at $380 per barrel. So we're not sure that this is going to this is going to happen, because if Russia is not able to export crude oil, it's essentially the only sort of last lifeline that they have for the economy. So it's all remains to be seen. We'll be paying attention to how this whole situation develops. But obviously, Russia is, let's say, less than excited to hear and learn about this potential news that may happen. And just in terms of the size of oil and gas industry in Russian GDP, it's formally 21%, so direct contribution. But essentially, this oil and gas value add creates many more multiples throughout the economy. So it's not really 21%, it's probably at least half 50% of Russian economy, because it creates indirectly many more sort of spending that sort of kind of like a ripple effects through the economy. So that's extremely important. In terms of Russian internal situation, Russian Statistics Bureau reported actually deflation in Russia, which it's really tiny, 0.17 of a percent. It's close to not being meaningful, but the trend is important, that it's actually the inflation went down from sort of, let's say, relatively significant number, went down to actually call it negative inflation or deflation, in other words. So that's obviously a result of the situation of the sanctions, where Russia gets a lot of U.S. dollars. The ruble becomes artificially, through artificial exchange rate, very expensive. It's about right now $55 or $60, somewhere in that ballpark. So there, and basically importers are forced to reduce prices, because if they keep even nominally the same price in rubles, the everything becomes super expensive for ordinary Russian. So they have to reduce the price a little bit, and that's what we're seeing right now. So it's all this, like, in what we're trying to say is this is all distorted picture in the first place, right? Because there is no free market exchange rate right now, because that exchange, like 55 or $50, 50 rubles per dollar, is largely artificial one. But in terms of inflation since year to date, it's actually 11.4%. Just for the reference for everyone. And now let's actually move to the situation on the front line. We're going to start with attacks by HIMARS system, because that's very important part of the Ukrainian command strategy at this point, and that's, I would say, important to understand and see what's going on. So there are actually news for today. The first one is HIMARS system managed to hit Russian ammunition depot and destroy it in this town Skadovsk on the Black Sea here, as you can see. And then the even more important news that this HIMARS systems, they actually not quite destroyed the bridge across the Dnieper River, but make it basically damaged it severely enough that it's barely possible. It's certainly not possible by heavy equipment, so like by tanks or by like, let's say, self-propelled howitzers. Anything that's heavy is essentially at this point cannot use that bridge. And probably another round of attack, which probably will happen on 21st, maybe 20, we don't know, but let's say it's for sure it's coming. It probably will make it completely impossible, even for, let's say, light trucks or light cars or anything. So essentially the Russian supply of all of these troops on the Kherson bridgehead at this point will be really depending on one. It's not even a bridge, the road over the dam, and that's pretty much it. And that's also being attacked to destroy the road itself. There's definitely no desire to destroy the dam, because that would be a huge disaster that lead to probably 100,000 of people dead if that were to happen. So the idea is obviously just to destroy the road that goes over the top of the dam, so the road is not usable. That really puts the Russian forces on the Kherson bridgehead into essentially isolation. It's effectively, you can say, it's semi-encirclement. And Dnipro River is not a tiny river. Over, like, this is where it falls into the Black Sea. The sort of width of the river is probably at least 2 to 300 meters. So you cannot easily create a bridge over it, and even if you create, this can be again attacked by HIMARS systems, so and going to be destroyed because it's very visible target. So essentially, this whole troops potentially could be cut off, or the supply is going to be extremely severely damaged, or let's say, yeah, probably damaged, and so this will force by itself eventually withdrawal of these troops. Maybe that's not going to happen overnight, but if things are not changing, and we don't think miracle is going to happen, this will lead to well, we couldn't say the troops are encircled, but effectively it's going to be, if let's say Russian troops decide to retreat, they probably will lose most of the heavy equipment at this point, especially if that road over the dam is destroyed. That's pretty much they essentially trapped on this bridgehead for more or less. I mean, the soldiers, they probably can evacuate those. It's not a problem, but it's so Russian troops on this bridgehead right now in much more difficult situation than Ukrainian troops were in Severodonetsk. Those who viewed at that time, you remember that Russian troops also destroyed the bridges over Siversky Donetsk river, but that river, you can swim over it. You can even sometimes find a ford over it. It's relatively shallow river, and it was hot. There was no precipitation, so the river is really shallow, super shallow. Versus here, this is like a probably like third largest river in Europe. It's for sure not the tiny river, and so crossing it is without special technical equipment is nearly impossible. So remains to be seen, but this could be the easiest sort of victory without really doing terribly much by Ukrainian troops. Well, let's see what happens. Russian side can still use, let's say, uh, you know, mm, transport helicopters, transport airplanes to resupply them, but that's really going to make it super expensive. They will be vulnerable to also attacks by anti-air systems. So this becomes total nightmare for the Russian command, effectively. And so this remains to be sort of seen. It needs to be watched, but this looks extremely positive for Ukrainian side. Even if Ukrainian side does not do immediate offensive, it's basically going to be death by thousand cuts of the Russian troops that essentially isolated on this Kherson bridgehead. So now let's actually do works through the entire front line, because we kind of really jumped to the Kherson bridgehead situation ahead of time, even though because it is important, it's probably affecting the whole strategic situation on the entire front line. But this is just we're probably a little bit preliminary to discuss eventually what's going to happen here, but we just kind of want to give you heads up on this. So now let's actually start in a clockwise fashion, starting from the very north. So there is intense exchange of fire along the border. It remains elevated, as it has been for the past, we don't know, probably a week or 10 days, something like that. That just at the same time, we're seeing sort of trend towards like sort of more intensity. We don't think that the Russian side has troops to sort of repeat attack towards Kiev. This is definitely out of question given the whole situation with the Russian army, where there is a shortage of simply manpower. So that is remaining out of question. So there could be, we're not saying they're imminent, but it's possible that there could be some, small incursion to sort of solve some tactical sort of problem along the border. But at large, this is probably going to remain more or less the same here along the border. Now let's move to Kharkiv, east of Kharkiv specifically. Let's see what's going on there. Here, there was essentially not really much. Small-scale probing attacks in the same kind of areas along this road towards Kharkiv. That's was usually here, and then also to call it, I guess it's north or northeast of Kazachalopan. Essentially, Russian troops are trying to protect this Kazachalopan at all cost. For whatever reason, it looks like it's a super important point for the Russian side. But essentially, the situation is the same, status quo, no real changes here. Now let's move to the Izyum bridgehead. Situation here is more or less the same. Essentially, probing attacks here in Bohorodechny, and that's it. The rest of it is more or less sort of quiet and not much going on. Actually, on this while we're on this topic, there are some don't have full strong confirmation, but we also have some information that this 21st Brigade by Russian Army was pulled out of here and was moved to North Donbass front line, and this probably have happened for a while. We just sort of discovered this only right now, but we wanted anyways to share this, and it's still not 100% confirmed. So we're just kind of mentioning about this, and once we have the more firm confirmation, we'll provide that update. Now let's actually look what's going on this North Donbass front line, where the most activity happening. Another update here is actually, let's actually go back here. So also what we found out is that the 15th Brigade, which was in Kiev East Group, now is actually operating here. This one of the units that sort of had, call it, mild casualties during the attack on Kiev, and they were fighting around Chernihiv as well. So they were out of the front line for some time. This doesn't mean that they just came. This is sort of where when we discovered them, they could have been there for a while, probably could be there for a month or so. But what we seeing is very clear trend that many of the units from this Kiev East attack group are returning, operating already on the battlefield, and some of them from the Kiev West. And some of them, as we discussed before, they just returned, such as 5th Tank Brigade and 11th Airborne Brigade. They just returned recently. And so okay, let's actually now jump to see the front line here. So again, Russian troops are attacking towards this to capture this village Grigorievka. No success there. Then another area of attack is Ivanodarivka. Again, no success there. Then another area of attack is Berestove. Here is actually situation is, call it, well, I guess unusual. So basically what's going on with this village, it's turning into no man's land. Basically, village sort of ceased to exist because it has been placed for intense fighting for probably at this point probably close to 2 months. So essentially, probably no essentially buildings, no ability to sort of, no protective sort of buildings or anything that you can hold on to at this point. So what's happening is Ukrainian troops kind of like out of it, but then Russian troops cannot get in because there is also intense Ukrainian artillery shelling there. So it's kind of like becoming sort of separation area or gray zone where neither side is really controlling it. So that's kind of like where this situation stands here. Then Russian troops continue to put pressure here in Pokrovsky, trying to completely take control of the entire village. So far, we don't have updates that they achieved that. Then, if we move a little bit south, typical areas of attack toward this power plant here, never ending to all very predictable areas, right? This village Vershina, this time they did not attack this village Semi area. So this is more or less we can say that Russian troops are putting pressure along their entire this North Donbass section of the front line. And by the way, we forgot to mention that also 24th Special Forces Brigade was moved from Izyum bridgehead to this area as well, and this is where the 15th Brigade is operating here. So this is just to kind of update and just kind of like new information that we wanted to share. So now let's actually move see what's going on. And another update is actually that Ukrainian Force Tank Brigade is also operating somewhere in this North Donbass area. We don't have exact location, so we're not putting it on the map, but it's operating somewhere in this area. So this point, as you can see, there are 3 tank brigades from Ukrainian army that are operating in this area. Now let's actually see what's going on west of Donetsk. Things here, again, it's all like a broken record, the same kind of ideas, right? Continuing attacks to capture this town of Avdiyivka that are not successful, that they're not getting anywhere, and then attacks to cut off this tiny salient that's created by Ukrainian troops, that's being held by Ukrainian troops around this village Novomikhailivka. But it's all probing attacks. They're not large scale attacks. It's just so we understand. So we just want to make clear the sort of intensity of the fighting is not. These are not like large scale major attacks. It's all relatively more like a probing attacks. Now let's see what's going on the Zaporizhia front line. Things here are quiet. All statical defenses by both sides, exchange of artillery fire, airstrikes, essentially the same. No real changes here. Then let's just jump to the Kherson bridgehead, which we discussed in depth so far. We'll just quickly reiterate. We're just gonna show what happened, because otherwise it is positional situation as well. Russian sources report that they observe buildup of Ukrainian troops here near the Davydiv Bridge. What they say is that they feel that Ukrainian troops are going to again create bridgehead and try to attack, to repeat that attack that failed about a month and a half ago, sometime in June. I think it was early June. So that's what the Russian sources are saying. Remains to be seen if that's true or not. But I think the most important part of it is that this is this Antonievsky bridge here. As you can see, this is the main bridge. It's like a live artery that sort of kind of like goes from Odessa through Mykolaiv to Kherson, and then part of it goes into Crimea, part of it is actually going to Melitopol here, to Mariupol, and actually then to Rostov-on-Don in Russia. So this is like a really big major artery, and essentially destruction of it is actually doing many things. So first, it's basically makes the supply of Russian troops here extremely difficult, and given that the Russian troops are relying on intense artillery fire and intense use of artillery shells, that really means that is not going to be available. So if, let's say, Ukrainian troops actually decide to again to repeat that attack, at this point it's going to be much more difficult to stop them, because you don't have the same level of artillery support, right? It's going to be much smaller, and probably this, even when this attacks happens, it's not going to be immediate, because the idea is also, okay, let Russian troops to sort of use up their ammunition as much as possible, so they're low on ammo, and then you're increasing your chance of success, essentially, right? So this was essentially almost close to be destroyed, as we discussed. It probably will be in the next coming days completely destroyed, so it's totally not usable. And then there is this road, that we said, over the dam, and that's also being, there are attempts to damage it, and it's probably going to get damaged enough to make it also unpassable and unusable. So that really, then it's really essentially trapping all of these Russian troops on this bridgehead, and essentially creating extremely difficult situation for the Russian command. So again, remains to be seen how this all gonna in the end play out. But this creates a really excellent opportunity for a Ukrainian army to eventually liberate this bridgehead here. Remains to be seen how this is going to be executed, if it's going to be successfully executed, and so on, because there's still, it's not like guaranteed. There are still many obstacles on this sort of path, but it's very promising, let's put this way. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow. Bye bye.